Hey everybody, welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the science community and giving a more proper perspective on what true science and spirituality is and how they're not two separate things at all. That's coming up next. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is the Wizard Factory Video Podcast, where you subscribe for weekly videos exploring deeper understanding of the universe and ourselves. My name is Logan Hart.
And I'm Brian Easterday.
If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and remember the tribe. Like the video as well, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. In case you didn't know we're on there, we like to share memes and little tidbits of knowledge, and probably going to be starting to do some more live videos as well, like shorter versions of the episodes kind of thing. So definitely check that out. And let's get into today's content. The Scientism trap, the missing link between science and spirituality. These are two concepts that are often thought of as separate, and beyond that, very contradictory or antagonistic of each other. Typically, there's a very large dichotomy between kind of atheistic, nihilistic people that very much use science or agreed upon science as the foundation of their beliefs or their worldviews. And then on the other side of it, you have religionists who are very dogmatic with their special magic book and set in their ways, and both very much dismissing one another as if they disprove each other or something like that. And of course, when you're looking at that dichotomy, in a way there's truth, because both foundations are faulty. There's scientism, which is not true science, and then religion, which is not true spirituality. And these two things are not compatible with each other, because the only division in this entire reality field lies in illusions. Truth is the all. It is the unified everything. And so anytime there is a conflict, it's because it's truth and illusion having some kind of battle in a way, often through human behavior. So that's kind of like setting the stage in terms of the dichotomy and the mindset that we want to get into here. So I'll let Brian comment on that.
Yeah, no, this is a good one to kind of look at, especially like with kind of what's going on in the world. We see a lot of people, this whole trust the science, listen to the scientists, and it's all this kind of blind faith that they take things on, but there's no actual practice of science itself. So yeah, we're, as always, we're going to start by defining our terms and everything. And Logan, would you like to start that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start kind of like with the official definition of science, according to a quick Google search, is the intellectual and practical activity. Each word is very loaded, intellectual, to pick apart, right? Discernment, truth and not truth, and practical, as in, is this useful? Is there some way that this knowledge empowers? Activity, so it's an action, encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and, keyword, and natural world through observation and experiment. So that, it's a lot of words there, but I really like the wording, and it's very concise in terms of what we're trying to get at with this episode. Whereas scientism, and Brian and I more or less kind of came up with this definition on our own, a dogmatic set of axioms arbitrarily agreed upon by a community with credentials to be considered an authority, a word we talk about and in critique often on this show, which tend to focus solely on the physical plane of reality. Very key part there as well. So it's dogmatic, it's rigid. It's like this is what's agreed upon. It's very similar to the church in so many ways when we start like really taking a closer look here.
Yeah, no, I think, just highlighting the difference between those, like, and with science, we can always take it back to the etymology of the word, which comes from the Latin sciare, which means to know. So science means that, that you're observing, so to know. That's why, like, when we use the word conscience, it's sciare, is to know together. That's what becoming conscious is. So like raising your awareness, your conscious thing, the things that we talk about on this channel all the time, that is the practice of science. You're bringing all the knowledge together. Where scientism, it's blind faith. It's, oh, these people in these magical white coats said this. Oh, he has a degree, so that means he is beyond fault. He's beyond being wrong, and then we just have to believe him. Oh, this government organization called the CDC or the FDA or whatever other alphabet gang you want to put out there, they said this, so that must be true. Even though you can look back at the history and show over and over and over again where those things were faulty and where they were incorrect, but these people will still have a blind faith. And you can really see this at play with like what's going on in the world right now. There's not science being practiced, there's scientism being practiced. And that's why, you see all the branch Covidians. It's just this blind faith, and it's become like a new religion. In the same way that it's tying them back from actually being able to move forward at all. So two very different things. One is seeking and questioning and being willing to see that, like, you could be wrong, you could have misinterpreted things. And when you're presented with new information, changing your mind, factoring that in. You're testing things through cosmic law and observing. That's why the word experiment's in there. You're experimenting and you're observing the results from that. The other is just blind faith. It's, they tell me that, these studies say that wearing a mask is good for me, so I'm going to do it, even though I can't like just trust my own body and see, oh, how do I feel when I wear this? It's two very different. One, you're putting the authority outside of yourself. The other, you are practicing that self-discovery yourself. Very, very different things.
Very well said. And the theme here really is that dogmatism, like you were saying, is like, this is the truth, and so it doesn't matter what conflicting information, even if it makes sense to my own mind, I'm going to reject that because I'm clinging to this. The interesting thing is there are a lot of parallels with, again, religion and science, even though they think that they're like total opposites of each other. That's the irony, is they're similar probably in more ways than they're not, in that, okay, at least on the religion side, you're looking at total rigid dogmatism because it doesn't change. If you're going off of a book that's thousands of years old, that book isn't changing. I mean, yeah, it's been kind of reworded a few times, loose translation, etc. Whereas it's with the science thing, it's a bit of a different kind of dogmatism, where it's more malleable because new discoveries and when things are shared, it's hard to kind of contain information sometimes. And so like they have to acknowledge these things, but it's done in a very controlled way. And so things may change a little bit more, be a little less rigid than, say, like following a holy book, but it's still dogmatic in the way that it's still adhering to this agreed upon truth, where if enough experts agree on something, then suddenly it like becomes like the holy text in the minds of people that treat science like a religion, which is most. We're kind of calling this out. So yeah, like it's very interesting to see how you've just traded the black robe with the little neck piece for the white, white lab coat. And instead of a holy book, you've got peer-reviewed journals and books authored by doctors and things like that. Like that is taken as truth to people who are from day one in this society that has been constructed, taught to not question, especially when it's something touted as authority. Like again, we see in the Milgram experiment, very famous study that proved that people will literally cause harm to another person up to the point of thinking that they've killed them just because a scientist told them to. That is terrifying. And that is a common psychological aspect. Know thyself, even the ugly shit. This is very important because when unchecked, it's dangerous. So, like, you know, there's so many implications of this. We're not just trying to get on our high horse and bitch about things. These are fundamental worldview understandings that if you're off on this stuff, your life and everything that you create is going to be fucked up. That's what natural law is all about. Trivium, keeping the foundation as close to truth as humanly possible. It doesn't mean perfect. It means ever striving for higher, deeper truths.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, like I said, it really does come down to being able to trust your own self and know yourself enough to make those kind of decisions and not just put your faith in someone else because they told you to. You know, that blind faith, that blind obedience, like that is a very, very dangerous thing. And we've seen throughout history how that has played out in many, many different ways, and it always ends terribly. You know, and so, you know, the next thing we can kind of get into is how modern science, you know, can really be a total farce, you know, and there was a specific example, Logan, that you had brought up when we were kind of brainstorming. Would you kind of like to bring that up?
Yeah, there's a TED talk. I mean, okay, TED's had some new implications, and you know, I'm not saying I agree with every TED talk ever made or the organization itself, but it was a video that was very impactful to me, featuring a speech by a man named Rupert Sheldrake. And he's a very unconventional scientist who has some very radical ideas and has been pretty much blacklisted and ostracized from the mainstream, I guess you could say, scientific community. And he is speaking in this talk, but also just on his own platforms. He's very outspoken about how absolutely messed up the scientific community is and how lacking in integrity it is, essentially. This isn't don't take this, what I'm saying, and have that knee-jerk black and white reaction to saying that all science is bullshit, that it's not useless or that it's not useful at all, that you should just completely throw away everything that's quote unquote agreed upon. That's not what we're saying. It's just that the things that are agreed upon, there are certain areas that bring about a lot of controversy, and it's not settled science, as they say, even though the mind of the typical person can literally see an online article being shared on Facebook where it just has the headline, and the headline starts with experts find blank, blank, blank. They're automatically going to believe that, even if they don't even click the damn article, much less follow any kind of paper trail to what, you know, sources are cited, what experiment this information is coming from. And that's how gullible people are. You could tell them anything and they would just gobble it up. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, there's so many ways from different angles why the agreed upon science, or whatever you want to call it, is very corrupted through the funding, which is largely controlled by governments. If not funding directly, they're completely locking down the way, and like they can very much manipulate the incentives of what findings come out of the experiments. That's a very simple way you can put it. Like they can basically create an experiment to prove anything you could imagine, just about. And then they pay enough scientists then to agree with it and put their little journal out and saying like, oh, this seems legit to me, and because I've got a PhD, that means something, you know. And that it very much largely is the process. It's really, really bad. So it's important to acknowledge this. And again, we're not just saying throw it all out, but just have some discernment. Don't just immediately assume something you read is true.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, because they can control, like, you know, who gets grants or who, you know, there's so many different things, from funding to different laws that they can pass. I mean, even if you look at like people who are wanting to do research into psychedelics for like depression and PTSD and things like that, very much controlled or limited by what the government allows. That's not, once you're bringing in government control and like you're setting things up and limiting that experience, that it's no longer like science. You're not actually looking at all the variables. You're not looking at everything and then trying to know. True science never stops. There's never a settled science. You know, even in the understanding of cosmic law, you can always come to a deeper understanding of it, see how it applies in more ways. You can discover new things beyond like the 7 hermetic principles, like that, where I say like everything is the same, just in a different way, or complicated simplicity. There's always different ways that you can come to understand natural law beyond just what people typically think of it as. So yeah, true science, it doesn't ever stop. And we can also see that like, another way that this can be kind of controlled is that scientists who do disagree, or they do put out something that goes against, like large pharmaceutical companies or something, like with the vaccine thing. That's a huge example, like with Dr. Wakefield, what happened to him, put out something like just questioning, saying we should look at this, like this is how you should practice science, and there's some indicators here that say this might be worth investigating more. That's essentially all the man's report ever said. But yeah, he's been totally like ostracized from the scientific community and blacklisted, and just, there's so many things. So many scientists, their careers, their home, their family, like all of the way they survive and make their living is all influenced by, well, if I get ostracized and I can't do this, then all of a sudden my whole life is upside down. And most, many people, especially if they're being paid well to produce a certain result, and then there's also that fear of being ostracized behind that, that's 2 very big incentives for people to be able to skew information, or to not be totally honest with their findings, or write it in such a way that, it's leading towards a confirmation bias on one side or another. There's so many different examples of different areas that we've seen this in, and especially when like large corporations and lobbyists get involved. You could see that with like the dairy industry, the whole like got milk one that was like a big one that we talked about the other day. That was a huge marketing campaign that didn't actually tell you anything specific. It didn't really give any studies or like anything to actually like prove that. It was just kind of an assertion put out there, but then it was backed by science. And then for many, many decades, like that was kind of the standard. Like I'm sure when we were raised, you were taught that like, yeah, you drink milk to make your bones strong and things like that. And we found out like that's not
really good for your teeth.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like that. It was all settled science, using DDT, there's so many things. And science is not always this very nice, thing either. There's, like look at Dr. Mengele, in Nazi Germany. You look at unit like 741, like within Japanese, like the things that they did were just like they would tie like people or animals like at certain distances away from like grenade blast and things, and then study the damage the explosion made. That science is really dark. But so it's not, people need to stop putting science up on as if it's like this kind of this holy thing, or this, it just means to know, to study and to observe, and that can be done on any spectrum, for a very, very benevolent purpose to a very, very twisted and evil purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Keyword again being observation and experiment. That's something I think is an interesting sort of distinguishment to make, is what things are you taking on faith that science says that is or isn't actually provable by you? Like if they're talking about the results of some like major atom collision machine, well, you don't have access to that. You can't go and do your own experiments using their atom accelerators. But simple things like, say, I don't know, the shape of the Earth with a couple of sticks and the sun, that sort of thing, that's observable, but I mean, even that kind of gets blurred because there's a lot of things that flat earthers say as proofs because they're saying, well, I trust my own eyes. It's the other form of imbalance, is only like believing what you can see and ignoring everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
You're cutting yourself off from 7 billion chances to learn something, or 8 billion now.
Mm-hmm.
If they say, I don't know, experts say there's 8 billion, maybe not. So that's interesting. You know, you need to be able to say, I don't know. That's an important part of being a true scientist. I don't know. I don't have enough evidence to formulate an opinion. I can hypothesize, but I'm not going around and saying, well, I know this to be sure. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge difference. And that's that sort of fluidity that you should have. That's what dogma doesn't look like. When you can evolve and you can say, I don't know, maybe, or I thought this yesterday, but I've seen something that challenges that. So now either I don't know or I know the other thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, you know, again, through observation and experiment, through of the physical and natural world. That sounds indistinguishable from practical paganism, from animism. What we constantly talk about this. Observe nature and learn from it. See the patterns. See if I do this, this happens. That's what an experiment is if it's because you're controlling the variables. And that's what being a magician really is. You control the variables in the experiment of life to produce a certain outcome because you sciere how the fuck shit works here. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. It's this. You should try it sometime.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that you brought that up because it really is when you see the animist and the pagan mindset and you look at the definition of like science, they're inseparable. They're not the same. And that's why you see many pagans as far as their spiritual path, they're not rejecting of science or anything, but they also aren't just blindly believing in, you know, things mm-hmm. either. They tend to like, will also go to nature and observe themselves like, well, actually that can't really work because I know this other thing. Or, mm-hmm. you know, it's that balance of, yeah, trusting yourself, but also being able to look outside in the world to know things, you know?
Right. Like think about just real quick, like when we talk about modern paganism, this is a concept we've really been wanting to kind of keep developing. That's what's so badass about it is spirituality. There's nothing new under the sun. Universal law has always applied just the same as it does now. What's different is scientific advancement, technology. We get to be modern day wizards that have cool electronic gadgetry as well as the ultimate gadgetry, which is the human body. Right. We know how to use both that's what being empowered is. You're utilizing everything at your disposal.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I love that. And that, yeah, cause you're coming to know, and then you're recognizing the pattern. So, you know, like with the pagan approach, you don't really see a separation between your spiritual path and science from like a left brain understanding of you're just observing, testing, experimenting, that, you know, there's no separation between those two. It's where, you know, you're using both your brain hemispheres. You're understanding intuition and emotions and nature and all the other things that could be tied to the metaphysical, but you're also not so stuck in that you can't use your logic. You can't, you know, apply that filter of science and discernment to see like what is true. You can see that, oh, there was like some experiments or there were some things done in this area that brought about this discovery. And then you can see them reflect back and forth. Like, you know, we just did the astrology episode and I was explaining how astronomy relates to astrology, you know, and like things that NASA are, you know, they're just now discovering. If you go back to the mythology, that same lesson, that same truth is there already. So, you know, that's where like the pagan perspective, you can see both. I can go and study from people who work at NASA and learn amazing things about astronomy and also be able to relate that to my astrological practice and how that relates on a spiritual level, on an energetic level with people, you know. So it's unifying both of these. You're seeing the forest and the trees.
Yes, exactly. And you can see this in many cases where scientific discovery is just now catching up to a lot of things that Hindus and, Buddhists have understood for thousands of years. Once again, it's there. The point is there is no actual separation between science and spirituality. It is the masculine and feminine truths of the reality field, whereas the physical and the spiritual planes are both separate yet not. It's one of those paradoxes that must be worked with throughout life, like that quote that I shared before about like the paradoxes are innumerable. I vow to reconcile them all, essentially. So we've looked at how the scientific community is extremely corrupted from the social aspect to it, to lobbying, powerful lobbying, and this is why you see such major dichotomies about things like the mask, or say carnism versus veganism. There's science on both sides. There's people saying, experts are saying this and that on both sides of, like, the vaccine one you mentioned. That's the point. You can't just say, well, this person who has, who went to school and got a degree, got a piece of paper, said this, therefore it's true. But I know it seems ridiculous that I even have to say this, but this is how people behave on a mass scale. It is ridiculous to me. So what we're getting at here is the key is to learn balance as usual, get out of the black and white thinking and into that more all-encompassing fluid state. And with that, you can trust, or like, listen to an expert. You can give some weight to their opinion, perhaps. Everybody has an opinion, right? Some are better than others. Everybody has a different level of knowledge about whatever the hell they're talking about at that time. So again, don't cut yourself off from that. You can learn so much through others. Think about, why would you spend your whole life learning every single lesson yourself when you can learn it from somebody that already did that and saved you a lot of time and like suffering as well? So this is something we're going to get into more about, like, when is suffering necessary or not? When is it actually serving you or not? It's a very important discernment as well. So yeah, someone somewhere knows more about you, knows more than you about any given subject. So saying things like all doctors are idiots, truthers, you hear this a lot, talking about, like, people that push vaccines and stuff, but yet they quote doctors or scientists or some other authority expert to prove their point. So it's really just about confirmation bias and finding the experts that say what you're saying so that you can say, yeah, what he said. It's just, it's silly, like, ego games and stuff. It's just all about being right and feeling superior because you're woke and they're not.
Yeah, it definitely, that's a good point to bring up in regards, like, yeah, people very much will allow things or certain belief systems that they just become such a part of their identity that it just becomes very, very dogmatic. And that can play out whether it's in religion or with scientism or blind faith in government or whatever it is. If you're not having that balance of observing yourself, testing things for yourself, but also being willing to say, I'm capable of being wrong and there's others that might know more than me. It's that balanced perspective between the outer world and the inner world. But if you're stuck in one or the other, you're stuck in a black and white state of thinking. You're going to be stuck in some sort of imbalance. So you have to unify those two. There's a reason the law of correspondence is as within, as without, as above, so below. Both are important. They're reflections of each other. But yeah, essentially, I think it kind of really sums up that, yeah, we're saying science is a very useful thing. That's very different than scientism and blind faith in whatever the experts say or, whatever, any of that. So I think that's something that, as if people could make that discernment between those, we could probably make a lot more progress as a species, and we wouldn't be so susceptible to propaganda on a mass scale like we've seen. And we've seen that the vast majority of people are really fucking stupid, and that they're very easily swayed. They're very easily manipulated. And it's because they're falling into this state of blind faith, whether it's blind faith in some religious book, blind faith in this study, whatever it is. They've lost the ability to actually practice true science themselves, to actually have that ability to know themselves.
Yes.
And that's what we're getting at. So we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. That's going to kind of wrap this one up. We also want to know, what do you guys think? You know, what were your thoughts on this subject? Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Whatever it is, let us know in the comments below. We definitely want to hear from you guys. Or if there's certain subjects or things that you would like to hear us talk about, let us know what those are. We're always open to suggestions from you guys, because we want to bring you the best content possible. Be sure to go to, thewizardfactory.com to check out all our different services on there. We, recently just expanded our astrological services that we're offering and things like that, getting into relationship astrology. And there's a few other little special tidbits and things that I'm also developing and working on that'll be out soon. We also have different packages on there. And one that everybody should check out if they haven't yet is our free initiation package. Go to the website, right at the very top of the page, click that, you enter your email, and you'll get a link for a free video series that helps you with some foundational spiritual practices and meditations and things that you can do to kind of start coming to know thyself. Totally free. So go check that out. And that will also get you access to our Wizard Factory Inner Sanctum group on Facebook it's more of an interactive group. So you get a chance to interact with us on a more personal level. We post all sorts of different things in there. It's very community kind of setting. So, you'll get access to that as well when you sign up. And be sure to also check out our Laying the Foundations playlist. If you haven't checked that out, we're getting up in episodes. We have a lot of content out there. So if you're new to the channel, that's a good playlist to start with, because it kind of lays out some of the foundational mindsets and beliefs and assumptions that we operate from on the show. It really helps lay out our kind of foundational worldview, and that will make a lot of the other episodes make sense, especially as we're kind of getting up there, because we're really building, concepts off of concepts. So that's going to wrap this one up. Thank you for tuning in, and until next week, be empowered, be inspired, and be encouraged.